there a Jeffrey Epstein right now that we don't know about?
There's a million of them.
A million of them. That's not a tabloid headline. That's the most listened to podcaster on earth, telling you that the man everyone's still arguing about is not the story. The story is everyone above him. The story is everyone after him. And the story is the names sitting inside 3 million pages that the United States Senate just voted to keep buried.
Oh, that couldn't be true. And then you realize that it is true.
Because here's what nobody on cable news is telling you. One of the names that surfaced in those files belongs to a man with 12 Oscar nominations, a UN climate ambassadorship, a foundation with his face on it, and a 104-acre private island off the coast of Belize that he has owned for 21 years, where construction has somehow never started.
The one problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia.
Nobody talks about pedophilia.
It's the big secret.
And it's widespread?
That was Corey Feldman on live national television. The host changed the subject. Years later, that same host would face allegations of his own. The pattern practically writes itself. And tonight, we're going to walk you through how that pattern leads, slowly, quietly, name by name, straight to the doorstep of Leonardo DiCaprio. Not as an accusation, as a question. The same question Joe Rogan asked. The same question Mel Gibson has been asking for 20 years. The same question Corey Feldman screamed into a microphone while the entire industry pretended he wasn't talking. Where is it happening now? And why does the man with the cleanest image in Hollywood own an island that nobody is allowed to see? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at every red carpet, every climate speech, every charity gala the same way Joe Rogan now looks at 3 million pages of files. Different. For years, the Epstein conversation had a rhythm to it. A new file would drop. A new name would surface. Cable news would do a 6-minute panel. A senator would dodge a question, and then everyone would go back to arguing about whatever was trending that afternoon. The story would die, the names would fade, the system would breathe out, and then move on. That rhythm worked because nobody with a real audience was willing to actually sit down with the documents, read them in full, and tell their listeners what they found inside. Until Joe Rogan did exactly that. He didn't theorize, he didn't speculate. He opened the files, he read them, and what he found was not a story about one dead financier in a Manhattan jail cell. What he found was a structure, a blueprint, a franchise model. And the moment he understood that the man everyone was still talking about was not the founder of this network but the operator of it, that's the moment the entire conversation changed.
Is there a Jeffrey Epstein right now that we don't know about?
There's a million of them.
Let that sentence land for a second. A million of them. Because if Rogan is right, and the files appear to back him up, then every single person who walked into Epstein's orbit, who flew on his plane, who showed up at his island, who appeared at his parties, who corresponded with his associates, who accepted his hospitality after his 2008 conviction, every one of those people is now a question mark. Not because they did anything illegal, but because the system they were adjacent to didn't die when Epstein did. It reorganized. It found a new face, a new island, a new operator, and nobody in the United States Department of Justice is willing to tell you who. Rogan understood this immediately, and here is what he said about the kind of operation Epstein was actually running.
I bet it was a real good honeypot where there's a lot of sophisticated intellectual discourse. You got a lot of brilliant people there. You've got great music, you know. You got like famous people are hanging around too. It's like, it seems really cool. And then if there's blackmail, the blackmail is like snuck into all this. Snuck in, come to the room with the cameras. The next thing you know, you're doing cocaine.
Snuck in. That word matters, because that is exactly how this works. You don't get invited to a kidnapping. You get invited to a dinner. You don't get invited to a crime. You get invited to a yacht. You don't get invited to a scandal. You get invited to a private island with a famous host and a famous guest list and beautiful surroundings and the kind of quiet luxury that makes you feel like you've finally arrived. And by the time you realize what's actually happening, you're already in the photographs. You're already on the manifest. You're already implicated. That is the trap. And that is the trap Mel Gibson tried to warn the world about for over 20 years before anyone was willing to listen. Long before Joe Rogan opened those files, before the Senate vote, before Virginia Giuffre, before the documentary, before any of this, there was a young Australian actor in his mid-20s walking into Hollywood for the first time, and he felt something. He couldn't name it, he couldn't prove it, but he felt it in the room.
Here, I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
The first time I really came over. You know, I had a whole bunch of weird paranoid suspicions about what the hell was going on because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
Nobody was really bothering to explain it to him. That detail is everything, because in any normal industry, when a newcomer arrives, somebody walks them through how things work. The unspoken rules, the chain of favors, the do's and the don'ts. But Mel Gibson walked into Hollywood and discovered that the people already inside assumed he already knew. And the things he was supposed to already know, the things nobody would explain, those were the things that horrified him.
And I formed a bunch of opinions about the town and about the people in it that were like, surely that couldn't be, because the whole place can't be like, Weird Town, where the stranger wanders in and all the people are in the bar and they all shut up when he looks at them and they tell you don't go into the house on the hill.
Don't go into the house on the hill. He's not being poetic. He's describing a feeling that anyone who has ever walked into a room protecting a secret knows by instinct. The conversation that stops mid-sentence, the eyes that flick toward each other, the smile that's just a beat too long. Mel Gibson felt that on day one, and like any sane person, his first move was to talk himself out of it.
And then you go away and you think, no, I was wrong. I mean, that's insane thinking. I'm paranoid. I imagined that stuff.
He convinced himself he was wrong. He convinced himself it was paranoia. He convinced himself a whole town couldn't possibly be like that. And then 20 years went by, and the world started to learn what he had been feeling that whole time. Harvey Weinstein, Bryan Singer, the Nickelodeon investigations, Quiet on Set, the Diddy indictment, the Epstein files. One after another, the things Mel Gibson had been told were insane thinking started coming out as documented criminal cases. And then he said this, and I want you to listen to it as carefully as you have ever listened to anything in your life.
And then you find out later on the track that you are exactly on track with a lot of this stuff. Not specifically on track, but that you could, that some of your worst nightmares were real at the time, and you think, it does rip your life to pieces.
Your worst nightmares were real. Not exaggerations, not rumors, nightmares. The word a man uses when the thing he was most afraid of turned out to be true. And it rips your life to pieces. That is the cost Mel Gibson paid for being right early. That is the cost the industry made him pay through the blacklisting, through the punchlines, through a decade of media coverage designed to make sure that whenever Mel Gibson tried to say anything about Hollywood, the audience was already laughing at him before he opened his mouth. That was the point, and it worked. Until the files started dropping. Here is the part of the story the mainstream press still doesn't want to talk about, because it makes them complicit. Because before Mel Gibson, before Joe Rogan, before any of this, there was one man who said it out loud on national television in plain English with cameras rolling, and the entire industry decided in real time to pretend it hadn't happened.
I can tell you that the number one problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia. That's the biggest problem for children in this industry.
The casting couch even applies to children.
Oh yeah. Not in the same way. It's all done under the radar.
Nobody talks about pedophilia.
It's the big secret.
Nobody talks about it. It's the big secret, said out loud, on a morning show, in front of a national audience. And the host moved on. The conversation moved on. The story moved on. And Corey Feldman went home to a career that, from that day forward, was systematically demolished by the very industry he had just exposed. They called him unstable. They called him a conspiracy theorist. They mocked his music. They mocked his appearance. They mocked his interviews. They turned him into a punchline so that whenever he opened his mouth, the audience would dismiss him before he could finish a sentence. Same playbook they ran on Mel Gibson. And then this happened.
As much as I've been behind the Wizard's curtain in 30 plus years and coming to this town, there are powerful forces at play that I don't understand, but I know they exist.
Powerful forces. He knows they exist. He's been behind the curtain for 30 years. He's not speaking metaphorically. He's telling you, with the clarity of a man who has personally seen the inside of the machine, that there is a structure operating in Hollywood that controls what gets exposed and what gets buried. And then he made it personal. He named the casualty.
There's one person to blame in the death of Corey Haim, and that person happens to be a Hollywood mogul. And that person needs to be exposed, but unfortunately I can't be the one to do it. But the person that knows who did it and knows who he is watching right now, I guarantee you.
Watching right now, past tense, present tense, still here. Feldman is telling a living person on camera that he knows what they did. He's telling the audience that the perpetrator is still in the industry, still working, still attending premieres, still collecting checks, still untouchable. And the only reason Feldman didn't say the name out loud is because, in his words, he can't be the one to do it. Read between those lines whatever you want. Most people read it the same way. And then he said the part that should make every single person watching this stop and think very carefully about who they admire.
And there are people in this industry who have gotten away with it for so long that they feel they're above the law. And that's got to change. That's got to stop.
Above the law. That phrase keeps surfacing. Mel Gibson uses different words for it. Joe Rogan uses different words for it. Corey Feldman uses these. But all three of them are pointing at exactly the same thing. A class of people inside the entertainment industry who have operated for so long with no consequences that they have stopped believing consequences apply to them. And the question, the only question that actually matters, is who, specifically, are they pointing at? Now we get to the part that broke the internet. Because for years, when the Epstein conversation came around to Hollywood, certain names kept getting whispered. Not because anyone had proof, not because anyone could point to a document, but because the patterns kept lining up in ways that were getting harder and harder to laugh off. And then the files dropped, and one of the names inside them was Leonardo DiCaprio. I want to be very precise about what is actually in the documents, because this is where most of the internet gets it wrong, and this is where a lot of bad faith commentary tries to swing a hammer when the evidence calls for a scalpel. Here is what the released materials actually show. In June of 2009, a British politician reached out to Jeffrey Epstein, asking Epstein for advice on potential endorsement opportunities for Leonardo DiCaprio in international markets: India, China, Japan, Russia. That is the documented appearance of DiCaprio's name in the file release. But here is the part the documents do not dispel. And here is where the questions begin to multiply. Court materials and witness statements from earlier proceedings have shown repeatedly that Jeffrey Epstein had a habit of name-dropping high-profile celebrities to impress potential victims and potential clients. DiCaprio's name was one of the names he allegedly used. Witnesses have clarified fairly that they never personally met DiCaprio and that they were only relaying what Epstein told them. Some of those claims have been walked back. Some have been clarified by representatives. Some have simply faded into the noise. But the question that nobody in mainstream press is willing to put on a Chiron is this: why was Jeffrey Epstein using Leonardo DiCaprio's name as social currency in the first place? Either the two men knew each other well enough that Epstein had social access to drop, or Epstein was inventing a relationship that didn't exist. Both options are uncomfortable. Both options demand answers. And as of today, we have answers to neither. Naomi Campbell put out a statement. Other names in the files have responded through representatives. Leonardo DiCaprio has said almost nothing. Not a denial, not a clarification, not a single direct address of why his name is in the documents at all. And in 2026, in the post-Epstein era, Corey Feldman correctly predicted, silence is no longer neutral. Silence is a position. Let's talk about what fans have been pointing at for over a decade. Not because it's evidence of anything criminal, but because it forms part of the larger pattern that makes the silence from Camp DiCaprio so much louder. There is a graph. You've probably seen it. It tracks the ages of every public girlfriend Leonardo DiCaprio has had over the past 25 years. And the graph has one very strange property. This is not a rumor. This is a documented public pattern, observable from public information, that fans, journalists, and meme accounts have been tracking since long before the Epstein files came up. Gisele Bündchen together from 1999 to 2005. Bar Raffaelli broke up the year she turned 25. Blake Lively relationship in her early 20s. Erin Heatherton early 20s. Tony Garn early 20s. Kelly Rohrbach broke up in 2015, the year she turned 25. Nina Agdal broke up in 2017, the year she turned 25. Camilla Morone broke up in 2022, just months after she turned 25. The pattern is so consistent that it has become a running joke on the internet for 15 straight years. And then something interesting happened, something nobody has fully explained yet. Around the time the Epstein files were rumored to be coming, Leonardo DiCaprio's pattern broke. He began a relationship with model Vittoria Ceretti, who is for the first time in his publicly tracked dating history over the apparent age threshold. Now, was that a coincidence? A genuine personal evolution? A rebrand? Image management? A response to incoming media scrutiny? Nobody knows. And again, I want to be crystal clear about this. Dating women in their early 20s is not a crime. Many of these women were accomplished professionals. Many of them have spoken positively about him publicly. None of this is illegal, but it is a pattern. And in the post-Epstein climate that Corey Feldman warned us about, every pattern around every powerful man gets a second look.
Like, we can talk about Harvey Weinstein,
women.
That's exactly what Feldman was talking about. The cultural mood shifted. The lens changed. The same behavior that was a tabloid joke in 2010 is now a question mark in 2026. And Leonardo DiCaprio, for reasons known only to his publicist, has chosen not to address it. But here is the part that should make every single one of you stop scrolling. Because when you stack his dating pattern next to his name in the Epstein files, next to his refusal to address either, you start to look at his other public assets very differently, specifically the island. In 2005, Leonardo DiCaprio paid $1.75 million for a 104-acre private island called Blackador Cay off the coast of Belize. He made a public announcement. He said it was going to become an eco-friendly luxury resort. He talked about it at environmental summits. He gave interviews about it. He used it as part of his public branding as one of Hollywood's leading climate activists. It is now 2026. That is 21 years. And I want you to sit with this number for a second, because it is the most important number in this entire video. Construction has not started. Not one building, not one foundation, not one brick. 21 years of public ownership of a private 104-acre island off the coast of a country with notoriously soft regulatory oversight. And there is nothing on it. Nothing built, nothing started, nothing to show for the announcement, nothing to show for the brand, nothing to show for the pitch deck. Just an island, quietly, owned, inaccessible. Now, to be fair to Leonardo DiCaprio, there are real public record reasons for the delays. Environmental activists pushed back, arguing that a luxury resort, even an eco-themed one, could damage the surrounding reef ecosystem. The approval process stalled. There were permitting issues. Belize is not the easiest place to build. All of that is true, but 21 years is a long time. Because you cannot talk about private celebrity-owned islands in 2026 without asking the question that Joe Rogan started this video with. Where is it happening now? Epstein had Little St. James. Naomi Campbell, a documented 15-year contact period with Epstein, named in the files nearly 300 times, owns a private island off the coast of Turkey shaped by sheer coincidence, like the Eye of Horus. David Copperfield owns 4 islands totaling 700 acres in the Bahamas with a secret village accessed through a hidden statue and what he has publicly called, with a straight face, a fountain of youth. Richard Branson owns Necker Island, where presidents, royals, and billionaires gather away from all press, all cameras, all oversight. And Leonardo DiCaprio owns 104 acres in Belize that, despite 2 decades of public promises, has never been built on, never been opened, never been photographed by press, and apparently never been anything except his to own. And the United States Department of Justice, which just dropped 3 million Epstein files, has not made a single move to address the structural gap that Epstein exploited for over a decade. Not one move. The Senate just voted 51 to 49 to keep the remaining files sealed. Joe Rogan caught it.
How many senators just voted against releasing this, man? It's just it's like there's two votes that are happening. The UFO disclosure thing, they keep voting against that.
Yeah.
And the Epstein list, they keep voting against that.
They keep voting against it. And then Rogan said the thing that makes every single person on every single private island in this story guilty, innocent, or somewhere in between sleep a little better at night.
What? And also, politically, it can't serve you to talk about a bad list. The list of people who said, let's protect people who like have done horrific shit to kids. You want to be on that list. But whatever's on that list must be so destabilizing.
Destabilizing. That word is doing all the work. Because the truth is, releasing those files in full would not destabilize America because of Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein is dead. Joe Rogan opened those files. He found his own name. He kept reading. And what he found is that Jeffrey Epstein was never the founder of this network. He was the operator. He was the franchisee. The system existed before him. The system continued without him. The system has a new face, a new island, a new set of operators, and the United States government has just publicly informed those operators that they are safe. Mel Gibson saw it 20 years ago and tried to warn us. They made him a punchline. Corey Feldman saw it 30 years ago and tried to warn us. They called him crazy. Joe Rogan opened the files in 2026 and finally said on the largest podcast on earth that there are 1 million Epstein right now, hiding in plain sight on private property, with no oversight, with no press access, with no consequences. Leonardo DiCaprio has not been charged with anything. Leonardo DiCaprio has not been accused of any crime. Leonardo DiCaprio is not on any list of suspects. I want to say that clearly on the record before this video ends. The document drops were rumored, why the eco-resort he announced in 2005 has never broken ground, and why in the post-Epstein world that Corey Feldman, Mel Gibson, and Joe Rogan have all begged us to wake up to the man with the cleanest image in Hollywood has built his life so carefully around private spaces that nobody is allowed inside. Drop a comment with the name you think we should be asking the same questions about. Because if Joe Rogan is right and there are 1 million Epstein out there right now, then we are nowhere near done with this list. And the next name on it is going to belong to somebody you currently admire. I'll see you in the next one.